Hi everybody, I'm Amy Magnus from A.N. Derringer, and I wanted to chat with you for a few minutes today about regulatory audit. For those of you who don't know what regulatory audit is, count yourself lucky. Regulatory audit is a branch of Customs and Border Protection that actually performs audits to determine whether or not an importer into the United States is compliant. And some of these auditors, well, they can be quite detailed in what they're looking at and their findings. You certainly don't want to be complacent here. If you get any notification at all from regulatory audit, it's time to sit up and take notice. I can tell you that a number of our customers and also people in the trade that we know have been receiving letters. They're called informed compliance letters, and they've raised a lot of curiosity. What are these letters about? And why is Customs sending them out right now? And who are they sending them to? Well, we have some guesses. We don't really have answers. We know that the fiscal year for Customs and Border Protection starts October 1st, 2016, but that is the fiscal year for 2017. What Customs does is they plan what audits or what type of enforcement action the Regulatory Audit Group is going to take in their fiscal year 2017 so that they can budget accordingly. These letters could be a harbinger of what's coming. It could be that you have been selected to be part of the audit pool. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be subjected to an audit, but it does mean, as I said, sit up and take notice. Let's talk a little bit about what regulatory audit does. First of all, they have full-blown audits, so we're just going to write that. That's just what they do. They audit. And if you get subjected to an audit, it is intrusive. It is a full-blown sample files, walk through the entire process to make sure that you're compliant, and this is almost a transactional review. Then they have something called a focused assessment. S-E-D. Sorry about my spelling. A focused assessment is more of regulatory audit comes into your office and will actually focus on a certain area, a trade priority, for example, an area of concern. It's not an audit, it's an assessment. And there's a significant difference between the two. An audit looks backwards at what has happened in the past. An assessment, in some ways, is more forward-looking in the sense that it makes sure that the importer has systems in place to ensure future compliance. So in a focused assessment, they may review your processes and your procedures, and if they're comfortable with the fact that you've got everything under control and you have written procedures and you have top management buy-in, then, they might be satisfied and they might go away for a while, which, by the way, is a good thing for you because you really don't want them hanging out. They do other kinds of audits too. If any of you are in an ISA program, the Importer Self-Assessment, this is really the gold standard of compliance. Occasionally, regulatory audit will do an ISA audit to ensure that you are, in fact, complying with the provisions of ISA. If any of you are interested in that, give us a call. We know a little bit more about it, but this wouldn't apply to you unless you are an ISA person, unless you've been accepted into the ISA program. What I wanted to talk to you about today, though, is we've learned recently that there's something new, and it's called a survey. And it's kind of a funny name, so I'm going to write it just so I don't get myself confused. A survey is actually a type of audit. And a type of review done by regulatory audit. I want to be careful because an audit is like this full-blown thing where they're doing transactional reviews. So a survey is not that. A survey is a three-part process. And this is why I wanted to chat with you about it today, because part one of this three-part process is the compliance letters. So if you've got a compliance letter in the mail recently, and they come along with CDs with all this informed compliance information, if you got one of those, then you may very well have already been selected for a survey process. Doesn't mean you necessarily were, but I'd say the odds are pretty good if I was a betting person that you're in that pool to have a regulatory auditor do a, quote, survey. So the first thing is the compliance letter. The second thing is a questionnaire. And this questionnaire is going to be a pretty detailed questionnaire. And we don't have a copy of one yet. We do have a copy of a broker questionnaire for a broker who has been targeted for one of these surveys, but I don't have one for an importer. So if you get a questionnaire, and I hope I spelled that right, if you get a questionnaire, you'll have to answer it completely and thoroughly. And you won't have an option here. You'll have to answer this questionnaire. And you're going to want to make absolutely sure that you answer completely and correctly. And the reason you want to make sure is because the third part of this survey process is what the Regulatory Audit Group is calling a walkthrough. So that's part 3. Now, this is very new, so we don't know anybody who has been, at this point anyway, we don't know anybody who's been subjected to part 2 and 3 yet, other than brokers, because by the way, Regulatory Audit also audits brokers to make sure that the brokers are doing what they're supposed to do. Our audits are a little different, though, than what an importer would be audited for, and that's because our role in the supply chain process is considerably different than an importer. A broker's role is to provide supervision and control over customs business. An importer's role is to exercise reasonable care in all of their importations. And how reasonable care is defined is a number of things, but it's basically making sure that you have processes in place to ensure compliance with customs rules, laws, and regulations, and any other government agency that might have oversight over imports into the U.S. So let's review. Regulatory audit is on the move. There are 400 regulatory auditors, by the way, and there are thousands of importers into the United States. So they need to figure out every year who they are going to target for various types of reviews. A full-blown audit, some type of focused assessment, and now this new process, which is a survey. The survey consists of 3 parts. It starts with the letter, then the questionnaire, and then a walkthrough. These are focused very much on the focused assessment, a forward-looking type of review to make sure that you have all the processes in place to ensure future compliance. And should they conduct this survey and make a determination that there's something lacking in your system, you could very well then be slated for something more intensive. But if you answer truly and correctly, and your answers are good answers, and they do a walkthrough and they determine that you've answered truthfully and they satisfy themselves that you've got processes in place, they'll leave you alone because they don't want to waste time on importers that are doing their part. They don't want to waste time on importers that are compliant, that have systems in place to be compliant. That's just a waste of their day. They really want to focus on those bad actors, the ones that are cheating. And so as long as you've got everything in place and can prove that you have everything in place, you really don't have anything to fear from regulatory audit. But, oh, by the way, why not take a little bit of time and do your own focused assessment right now? Walk through your processes. Make sure they're documented. Get your team together. Make sure everyone in your company understands how serious it is to be compliant with U.S. customs rules, laws, and regulations, because it could be painful if you are not. And as always, if you need any help in these areas, A.N. Derringer, your broker, we stand to help you prepare for something like this, or make sure that you're never, ever caught unaware of these types of processes.